Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, no coincidence. Good morning, Lady Barbara. I believe that is Lady Cassandra, correct? I'm trying to make sure I remember everybody's name with their tag name. Good morning, Pastor Ben. Good morning, Lady Judy. Good morning, Lady Ravonda. So, I'm going to jump right into everything today. Welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. Today we're talking health and wealth. Good. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yes, it's Cassandra. Good morning, Life Transitions. Good morning to each and every one of you who are watching us from around the world, from wherever you're watching us, on whatever mobile device or laptop. You can also watch Periscope and YouTube live stream through your laptop as well. So, yesterday I had a wonderful day, and then toward the end of the evening, I took a nasty tumble. I think I tripped over an uneven concrete step, and I went face first flying into the concrete. I managed to put both of my hands down, which kind of stopped some of the fall, but then I hurt my wrist and I scraped up the palms of my hands and I scraped up my knees and I rolled over into the grass, and I don't know what happened, but the pain in my wrist was so excruciating that I actually started to black out. And luckily, my husband turned around because we were getting ready to go somewhere, and he was already in the car, but he turned around because he was wondering where I was at, and he saw me face down in the grass, so he had to come and rescue me because I couldn't get up. So that was my spill for yesterday, and I pray that nothing else happens because, yeah. But anyway, I'm okay. I'm a little sore. Um, but I said, well, this actually ties into what I can talk about today in terms of health. Um, so, what I did last night, of course, I used some products that hopefully you will have in your summer repertoire because summer is here. Things happen, children get hurt, you might get hurt. But some things that I found that were helpful for me last night to actually help with swelling, scarring, and bruising. I used these last night. So what I used was witch hazel, antiseptic cleanser, good for irritated, red, damaged, blemish, or inflamed skin. T.N. Dickinson is a pretty good witch hazel, but you can use any witch hazel. So I treated myself with some witch hazel last night, and as you can see, you barely see anything on the palms of my hands. They were really, really red last night and scratched up pretty bad. But I used witch hazel last night, and as you can see, most of the redness is gone. I also had some scratches here on my wrist. I don't even see the scratches this morning. So, and redness, I don't even see either one of them. I am going to use it again today. My wrist is still hurting a little bit right here in the palm area. So, please make sure this summer you have a trusty Ace bandage. They work for knees, wrists, uh, ankles. If you don't know how to wrap an Ace bandage, you can look online, but it's really easy. I actually start wrapping mine. I wrapped mine at the wrist. All right. I started at my wrist. I just put my hand up against my chest to start my wrapping. All right. I went around my wrist a couple of times. You can see that. And then I brought it over my four fingers. Then I wrapped again over my wrist. Four fingers. I might do it a little bit more over my wrist if that's where, your ache or your pain is, over my fingers, and then I carried it back into my wrist. All right. And then my little clip to hold it in is over there. So I'm not going to reach for it. But all right. Just basic ace bandage. Basic ace bandage. And keep it still. That's what I did. I kept it still yesterday. Before I did this, I did put a little bit of ice on it for about 30 minutes. And then I wrapped. As you can see, I took it off. Okay. No swelling. All right. So again, when we get injured, these are some things that we can use. Hydrogen peroxide. All right. I also use some hydrogen peroxide along with the witch hazel. Trusty Band-Aids. I try to get Band-Aids that are latex free because I'm allergic to latex. All right. And my trusty saving oil for everything. Vitamin E oil. You can get it at GNC. I got the little bottle here at Food Lion grocery store. Just look in the facial cleanser section is usually where vitamin E oil is. Vitamin E oil for scarring. All right. I put some on my knees. I don't see any scarring on my knees this morning. Praise the Lord. I'm going to put some more on there. But ladies, gentlemen, if you want to get rid of deep scarring, start putting vitamin E on your injuries as soon as they happen and continue to apply it. It will turn your scarring back to your skin color as opposed to leaving the dark spots. And even if you do have some previous scarring and you want to get rid of the dark spots, vitamin E oil goes beneath the skin to heal. All right. So those are a little bit of the tricks of the trade. And I am feeling great. Thank God. I have a little bit of soreness in my wrist, but nothing really bad. So I said, let me share that with you all for my health segment. So basic supplies, witch hazel, vitamin E oil, hydrogen peroxide, Band-Aids, ace bandage. Make sure you grab those because incidences do happen. And if you put a little pack together, put it in your car, especially if you have children, you'll be able to bandage them up quickly. Mothers will kiss the boo-boos and baby will be you will be on your way. All right. Obviously, if you have a more serious injury than what I had, or you have continued swelling, if you have bone sticking out, please go to the hospital. Thanks. All right. Disclaimer there, I am not a medical doctor. This is simply educational things that help you. All right. So today we are going to begin with your score, and we're finishing up the chapter talking about gaming the system. So we're going to stop there in your score, and then we will pick this book back up in season 4. In season 4, we're going to be starting with the 5 biggest credit mistakes and how to avoid them. All right. But today we're dealing with debt collectors. So we talked about how to fix a mistake with a creditor. Now we're moving on to how do you deal with the debt collectors themselves. You don't have to hang up on them. As he said before, if you pick up the phone and call them back, say you miss a call, but if you pick up the phone and call them back, they will have a record of your phone number. However, you don't want to go around ignoring debt collectors. As much as you possibly can, you do want to communicate. You do want to establish a payment plan, however much you can pay. All right. Because The goal is, if you're wanting to operate in the world of credit, the goal is improving your credit score. So let's talk about dealing with debt collectors. Once an account has gone delinquent, it's only a matter of time before the creditor to which you owe the money sells off the debt to a collection agency. That collection agency buys the debt for a fraction of what you owe, but then it keeps anything it collects from you. Having a collection isn't anything to be ashamed about. It happens sometimes when you can't pay a bill because of unforeseen life events, but it can also happen without you even knowing it. One of the favorite strategies of debt collecting companies is to purchase a large portfolio of debt and simply go through and quietly add each individual debt to the credit reports of the people in the database that they just bought. They won't bother to send you any letters or try to collect from you. They're just waiting for you to notice problems on your credit score and discover where those issues are arising. Then most people will come running to try to settle the debt, especially if it isn't for a lot of money. Good morning, hubby. It's shady but perfectly legal for them to do this as long as the debt is legitimately yours. Of course, other collection efforts are more aggressive. You can get stern letters demanding repayment and barrages of phone calls from collectors who will literally say anything to try to get you to pay them something. But before you become intimidated into forking over your debit card number so they can clean you out, you need to take some precautions to make sure you're settling these financial problems once and for all. First, you have the right to tell any collector who calls you on the phone that the only way you will respond to them is via a written letter. So that's number one. Ask for their address and send them a letter stating that you will not respond to any telephone calls. If they try to call again after your warning, just remind them that they're in violation of the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and that you can sue them. That'll stop the phone calls. Your next step is to make sure that the debt these collectors are chasing is both yours and also still valid. By checking your credit report, you can confirm that the claims from the collector truly match up with what you're seeing on your report. If a collector demands cash settlement for some credit card bill you had 10 years ago, the clock has already run out on that debt, and you are not obligated to pay it. Be sure to check the laws in your state to see what the statute of limitations is on a creditor's liability and ability to sue you for an unpaid debt. It ranges from 3 to 10 years depending on the state. So that's number two. Make sure that your debt is still valid. If it's not still valid, you're not obligated to pay it. Of course, not all debt collectors are going to look at the debt they've purchased in bulk and say, gee, this person's debt is a month past expiration. We'd better strike it from our books. What really happens is that collectors simply try to collect on all the debt they have purchased, and if you're foolish enough or pressured enough to pay up on an 11-year-old debt, well, that's on you. In basic terms, the 7-year window is the time frame that items have to show up in your credit report. And it's also the same time frame you're looking at for creditors to be able to pressure you for a certain debt, at least when it comes to being able to hurt your score. In other words, if somebody is coming after you for a run-of-the-mill credit card debt outside that 7-year window, whether or not you settle it is not going to affect your credit score. And in many cases, you're not legally obligated to pay. However, specific kinds of debt like federally backed student loans and court judgments never expire. If you look on your credit report and don't see the debt that's being referenced by the collection agency, you can send a letter demanding that it verifies the debt before you pay anything. The agency needs to prove that it acquired the debt from somebody with proof that you were the one who took out that loan or signed for that credit card. That verification comes in the form of a name, social security number, address, account number, last payment date, and full name of the original creditor on the amount you owe. According to a Federal Trade Commission study published in 2013, only about 50% of the debt that consumers ask to be verified is actually verified by the collection agencies that own it. This happens for a number of reasons. The older the debt becomes, the more often it has been transferred from collection agency to collection agency for an average transaction price of about 4 cents per dollar of debt being purchased. If you defaulted, for example, on your American Express account 3 months ago, the first collection agency to buy that debt paid the highest premium for it because the information was fresh. It knows right where to find you, and it has the leverage of being fresh in your mind. Plus, you know you owe the money, assuming it wasn't a mistake on your report, and you're vulnerable to being pushed into settling it. But after a certain amount of time has passed, a collector that isn't able to collect from you will sell your debt on to another collector that specializes in the long shots. Good morning. It buys collections accounts by the tens of thousands for pennies on the dollar and only needs to convert a few of them in order to make a healthy return on its investment. As your debt gets older and gets sold further down the line, the companies who have purchased the debt don't have much invested in it. They aren't usually going to want to go through the expense of verifying it if you request that, and as a result, they're likely to just write it off. Because each collector has less and less invested, they're also increasingly more likely to be willing to make a deal. For example, if you have an old department store account that went into collections 5 years ago for a $500 debt, the third or fourth collection company that bought your debt might only have a couple of bucks into it. If you offer to settle the debt for a fraction of the original dollar figure, it could still well be a big profit for the collector themselves. However you decide to negotiate, you have to start from the position that you will not settle unless you get a letter stipulating that the debt will be removed from your credit report when you pay the agreed upon settlement. Don't be fooled if the collector says it will put a note on your account saying that you paid. A note doesn't do anything to affect the underlying score or the impact that late payment has on your score. You want nothing less than a removal of the collection. What are the stakes if you don't pay or settle? Well, every month that collection reports on your credit, you will get hit with another penalty. Your score will continue to drop until you do something about it. At worst, you want to pay something to get it settled, even if the agency won't remove the derogatory hit. Medical debt requires a different kind of strategy. It's different than any other debt on your record in that the information contained can be highly sensitive. If it can contain information about who your doctors are, what you've been treated for, and the record of your care. Those pieces of information are protected by the HIPAA. One of the foundations of HIPAA is that nobody can talk about your health information unless you give them written authorization. A 2016 study done by the New York Times and the Kaiser Family Foundation found that in the last year, 20% of Americans had medical bills that they struggled to pay. That's a lot of people sweating over some big numbers and a lot of creditors and collection agencies coming after delinquent payments. If you're behind on your payments to your original medical creditor, say the hospital where you got your leg fixed in the emergency room, it is all the paperwork you signed when you checked in, allowing access to your medical records. But if you don't pay your bill with that creditor and it sells that debt to a collection agency, the collection agency doesn't have the same rights to your private medical information. Unless you sign a different form for the collector, the only thing it can talk to you about is the dollar figure you owe. This can put a poorly trained debt collection cold caller in a bad position. If you get one of those calls for collection, you're perfectly within your rights to ask the caller what the nature of the debt was and whether they can give you information about it so you can figure out what you're supposed to pay. If the collector is dense enough to start rattling off identifying information, that collection agency has just violated the HIPAA in a very bad way. Your next move is to write a letter to the collection agency stating what happened and that you have recorded proof. You can then offer to forget about the HIPAA violation in exchange for debt forgiveness and for the collection agency scratching your debt from the record. When you check your credit report, you need to be extremely diligent about examining any medical debt or collections you may have. Many people have medical bills they never even knew they had accumulated. Curiously, this happens most frequently to people who have medical insurance. They go to the hospital, get something taken care of, and later on down the line, the insurance company decides not to pay for all of it. The hospital then sends out a bill for the remainder. Because of the blizzard of paperwork that comes out of being in the hospital, those bills, which are often for very small amounts of money, like $100 or $150, can get lost. But when they show up later as a collection, that $100 unpaid bill hits your credit score hard. So, your action plan. Whether or not you are currently in a bad situation with one of the credit bureaus, a creditor, or a collector, you can take some proactive steps to protect yourself. Here are 6 of them if you're taking notes. Number 1, request a credit report from one bureau every 4 months. By rotating the bureaus over the course of a year, you will begin to see everything going on in your credit as far as the 3 bureaus are concerned. Some creditors space out their reporting or they don't report to all 3 bureaus. If you don't create some space between the requests and monitor all 3 on a pattern, you could well miss some of the activity. Number 2, once you have your reports, write to each of the 3 bureaus and request that old, outdated addresses, phone numbers, and employers be removed from your report. The only pieces of information required on your report are your name, social security number, and current address. By removing old addresses, you're actually taking away a valuable tool for collectors with old debt to track you down. Creditors and collectors will often only be able to associate data tied to your address. If you remove the old addresses, they won't be able to tie some of these old debts to you. If it's a collector down the stream who bought your account as one of the thousands on a basic spreadsheet, they will just move on to the next one. Number 3, send a letter to each of the hospitals and medical offices you deal with stating specifically that you're opting out of any HIPAA authorized disclosure of your protected medical information, which includes name, address, social security number, payment information, and treatment procedures to anybody besides yourself and your attorney. Also specify that you do not authorize the disclosure of any protected information to any family members or for notification. You're establishing that you will be the only conduit of your medical information and the financial information tied to it. Number 4, identify those key items in your reports that are causing the most negative impact and try to resolve them first. Generally speaking, late payments and delinquencies in the last 2 years are going to hurt your scores more than anything else. If you can take care of some of those blemishes, you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Number 5, clip the low-hanging fruit. You can improve your scores just by doing some of the basic cleanup we've been talking about, like reducing your credit card balances. If you have collections for small amounts and the creditors won't settle for less than you owe, bite the bullet and send the check to them. Get it removed from your report. And number 6, add positives when you can. Becoming an authorized user on an account is a nice positive, as is adding in other data that isn't always considered on a report. I've had clients use rentreporters.com very successfully to get their positive rental payment history included on their credit report. If you can show you've been paying rent on time for 7 years, that's a positive for you. Given what I do for a living, one of the first questions I get when I'm giving a presentation is, when is it time to bring in a professional? With the tools in this book, you're going to be able to handle many situations on your own. But if you're uncomfortable negotiating on the phone and dealing with pushback from creditors, you should consider letting a professional help you. That's especially true when you're dealing with complex issues with serious legal ramifications like potential bankruptcy, foreclosures, tax liens, and court judgments. Fumbling a negotiation for a few $100s isn't the end of the world, but getting yourself in deeper trouble with the court system can have real consequences. Your score. I recommend, if you don't already have this book and you're looking to improve your credit, please go out and get this book. We will pick up reading it in season 4. All right. Wealth Can't Wait by David Osborne and Paul Morris. And we are on chapter 6, Building Greater Wealth Naturally. In chapter 7, the importance of having a ground game and an air game. If we have time, we will get into chapter 8. If not, we will leave chapter 8 for season 4. But chapter 8 is talking about asset-based living versus cash flow-based living. Y'all ready? Let's go. Measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually to improvement. If you can't measure something, you cannot understand it. If you can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you cannot improve it. H. James Harrington. If you think of yourself as a corporation, you will naturally build greater wealth. For example, Paul's inspiration for creating the corporation ME Inc. came from a video that he watched about 15 years ago that featured his co-author. At that time, Paul was in his late 30s and didn't know David very well. David was talking about how he used leverage by hiring other people to start Keller Williams offices for him and to run his business operations. In that video, when David mentioned that he had his own personal chief financial officer, Paul realized that David ran his entire life like a corporation. David measured everything, including income, expenses, and growth. He set goals like earnings expectations and measured his progress against them. He hired and fired and then hired others who hired and fired. It was something that, through requiring oversight, he could walk away from, and it would still carry on. By that time, Paul already owned several business entities. After watching his video, he shifted in mindset and action and formed a corporation called Morris Enterprises, or Me Inc. Originally, it was 100% self-owned and did nothing other than serve as a place for all his income and expenses to flow through. At some point in life, when your business grows large enough, the tax and structural benefits outweigh the cost of running a corporation. That's when you should take this step and form your version of Me Inc. You can, however, begin to think of yourself as a corporation immediately. In fact, adopting this mindset will significantly benefit your business. Even if you are an hourly wage earner, your household generates income and incurs expenses. Following are some questions to get you started. Question number 1. How much does your household earn a year? Question number 2. What are the sources of your household income? Question number 3. What is your net income after taxes? Question number 4. How much do you spend on essentials? Question number 5. How much do you spend on leisure or discretionary spending? And question number 6. How much could you invest? Once you've answered these questions, you can take these 3 basic steps to begin treating yourself like a corporation. 1. Learn how to create a profit and loss statement. 2. Track your expenses every month. And 3. Create a personal financial statement. What you watch will grow. What you measure, you can impact. It's proven, and it will change the way you build your life and build your wealth. This process is ever evolving. You may acquire more than 30 entities in addition to your first. When you add up the cost of bookkeeping, accounting, and corporate compliance, it might make sense to have your own chief financial officer in-house. Our vision is for your corporation to grow to the point where it is a living, breathing entity that creates jobs and cash flow for you, your family, and your team. Eventually, it can even have a new CEO. It's never too soon to begin. View your life and money flows from a corporate perspective, enhanced by people, systems, leverage, measured goals, and results. Now, what is he talking about? If you understand what just happened with our tax system, you're going to find that people who are in business, right, they're going to be doing better next tax season than someone who is not in business, right? Everybody understand that? That based on what they just did with our tax system, people who are in business are going to be very happy, and people who don't own a business at all are going to be the ones hurting next tax season. So what can you do to head that off? Prophet Charles is on here. He can tell you a lot about what to do to head that off. One is, if you are operating a business, most of you are operating a business, but you're not operating it formally. So this would definitely be the time before tax season rolls around to begin to formulate your actual business. All right. And there are plenty of books out there. There are plenty of webinars and free seminars. YouTube is the world classroom right now to show you how to start and form a business around what you're already doing. Some of you sell things out of your house. You're already doing that, but you don't have it as a formally organized business. Some of you bake goods like desserts and things like that. You don't have it as a formal business, but you've been doing it for years. Some of you make clothing or make jewelry, and you've been selling it as an informal hobby, but it's not an official business yet. So what he's talking about is looking at your life and thinking about what part of your life can be a business. Because as he said, you're going to find out that the cost of starting the business will be outweighed by the tax and structural benefits when you file taxes for your business. So that's one of the things that you can think about in terms of creating wealth, is starting a business with something that you're already doing. Are you already baking cakes and baking pies and doing things over the holidays and selling them to people? That probably should be organized into a formal business. Now, are there different types of businesses? Yes, there are. And again, if you want information on what would be the best type of business for you to start, whether a sole proprietorship, incorporated, or an LLC, there are plenty of videos that will give you the basics on types of businesses and which business would best fit you. But it is something to think about in terms of building wealth, is starting your own business. All right. Chapter 7, the importance of having a, quote, ground game and an air game. There are some people who live in a dream world, and there are some people who face reality, and then there are those who turn one into the other. Douglas H. Everett. The way of work. Implementing our concept of having a good ground game and a good air game will help you build wealth. When David got started in real estate, there were no office hours. He figured he could just work longer and have more wins. Sure enough, as he began to have success, he started working as many hours a day as he could. He found a comrade in arms, a fellow realtor, and they started competing on the number of hours they worked each day. At the end of the week, they would email each other their total hours worked. Eventually, working 14-hour days grew very exhausting. It was also completely mind numbing. Years went by like this until he got a wake up call. The hazards of grinding. One day, while working insane hours, David got a painful rash on his chest. It hurt so much that he couldn't sleep. The doctor told him he had shingles. David was only 31 years old, and his doctor said it was stress related. He used this experience as an opportunity to reflect, and he has come to appreciate the early wake up call. Since that day, he made a shift and hired some coaches. He was making a great income for a 31-year-old, but a coach pointed out that the way he treated himself was like an indentured servant. When he traveled, he stayed in cheap hotels and rented cheap cars. He created all that income for himself with no reward. He was working to earn for some future day. As Dr. Fred Gross, a mentor of David, says, once a pattern is established, we can follow it without thinking, thereby conserving our body's energy. Does it serve us or does it sabotage us? In David's case, his habit of just working to earn was beginning to sabotage his health. What he learned from this experience was that the way of wealth requires a balanced attack. You have to have a good ground game and a good air game. Your ground game is getting to work, gutting it out, grinding away, and getting things done. If you are in sales, your ground game might be making calls, getting appointments, and closing sales. If you are in construction, your ground game is getting to work, doing the job, building the home or the plant, hiring the subs, and whatever else it takes to get the work completed. Lots of people have a solid ground game, but no air game. Their earnings can range from very little to quite a bit. You know you have a good ground game when you are earning a paycheck and doing a good job. Fewer people have a good air game, which includes your plan, your strategy, and your tactics. You must have a good plan and evaluate yourself against it, or you end up like Alice in Wonderland, who had the following exchange with the Cheshire Cat when she was at the crossroads. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? Alice said. That depends a good deal on where you want to go, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. Like Alice, if you don't have a plan for your life, the first person you will meet will give you one. However, if you want ultimate influence over where you go, then begin to create a vision for yourself. You will naturally attract people to your life who have a purpose, with passions that run along the same lines as yours. The best thing about the air game is it only takes 1 hour per week of planning to blow by your previous best with very little effort. It's important to have a balanced attack. For example, if you have a good air game but no ground game, you'll end up planning all the time without very little follow through. Success requires both. For example, a guy we know, we'll call him Mike, works 70 plus hours a week. Mike is 59. He has worked 70 hours a week since he was a young man. What's interesting about him is that even though he has made millions from his work, he doesn't have much to show for it. Mike has been so focused on his work that he hasn't created his air game. Mike is a grinder. He has an excellent ground game, making things happen with the sheer force of his actions. But he hasn't built any wealth because by focusing solely on his ground game, he has overlooked how he might leverage his significant talent. At the other end of the spectrum, David once hired an Ivy League MBA to get into real estate sales. The employee dressed well, he was extremely smart, and he had a great air game, but he had no ground game. He refused to grind it out even a little bit. 6 months later, he put together an amazing listing presentation, but no one ever saw it. As a result, he was out of business in less than a year. His lack of ground game meant no results and therefore no income. So, you have to have a good air game, which is your planning and vision skills, to take full advantage of your earning skills. You also have to have a good ground game, grinding through your work and making it happen to execute your plan. People tend to be naturally good at one or the other. What comes easily to you? Create an awareness that building wealth requires both. Chapter 8. Asset-based living versus cash flow based living. And we're going to finish this chapter and then we will stop at this chapter. It's easy to come up with new ideas. The hard part is letting go of what worked for you 2 years ago, but will soon be out of date. Roger Vonich. Building wealth requires asset-based living. To demonstrate the difference between asset-based living and cash flow-based living, let's look at two situations involving a lottery winner. Both win $1 million after taxes. The first guy takes $1 million over 10 years at $100,000 a year in income. Maybe he gets a bump because of the future value of money, so he gets $120,000 a year over 10 years. He has a great 10 years. He lives well, buys a nice car and a nice home. He relaxes for 10 years and doesn't work at all. Life is good. That is, until the 10 years are up. Then he has to sell the house and the car because he cannot afford them anymore. He goes back to work, but at least he has a story to tell. The second person takes the lump sum. She invests her $1 million in real estate. She is fairly conservative and buys 10 homes worth $150,000 each and only borrows $500,000. She rents them out for an average of $1,800 a month. That earns her a gross income of $18,000 a month. 40% or $7,200 a month goes to repairs, taxes, and vacancy, leaving her with about $10,800 a month. Further, she has to pay off the $500,000, which is at 5% interest on a 15-year note and cost her $4,000 a month. This includes the principal pay down and leaves her about $6,000 a month or $72,000 a year in net income. She lives well, but it is a fair amount less than the other lottery winner. However, she also makes an extra payment each year of $4,000, so she lives on about $5,000 extra a month or 60% of the first guy's revenue. Unlike the first lottery winner, she doesn't quit her job and doesn't change her life other than developing skills at managing her rental properties. Making an extra payment allows her to pay off the $500,000 in 10 years. At the end of the same 10 years, she has 10 homes that have now appreciated $50,000 each in value. Her net worth is now $2 million. Her passive income grew from her modest rent increases, and her debt is paid down to zero. She now has an extra $144,000 a year for the rest of her life, and she owns the assets which continue to appreciate over time. The first guy lived on his cash flow while the woman practiced asset-based living. She lived off the income produced by her assets. Very few of us win the lottery. Most people receive a paycheck twice a month. If you spend your life living off your paycheck, you're actually living off your cash flow. If instead you live below your means and save the extra cash, you can use that cash to then begin to buy assets. This will put you on the path to asset-based living. If you practice this discipline, you'll have cash flow from your assets. Eventually, you'll be able to live off the income. This is the way the wealthy live, and it is possible for you. Wealth Accelerator. The simplest way to build wealth is to live below your means and to invest your excess cash flow wisely. The sooner you save cash to invest, the sooner you learn how to invest it. One thing is for sure, without building assets, you will almost certainly never become wealthy. Wealth comes in waves. Be aware of this. Suppose you add assets to your portfolio, smart, well-positioned assets. Rather than growing in a straight line, increasing your net worth 3% to 5% year after year, they may be flat for 5 years and then jump 50% in 2 years. Markets rise and fall in a jerky manner rather than exhibiting straight line growth. Buy assets that will survive most down markets with positive cash flow. So, how do you take advantage of this truth? You buy what will survive most in most down markets in a positive cash flow. Accumulate as many of these intelligent assets as possible, and then when the market jumps, you will reap an unfair share of the market rise. We both use basic investing disciplines and realize that neither of us can perfectly time the market. We buy smart assets in any market without attempting to time them. We just keep building our portfolio, adding lots of real estate assets well before and during the downturn of 2008 to 2011. Then, when the market started rising around 2012, 2013, we gained more in terms of net asset value or net worth than at any other time in our life. We had spent nearly 2 decades living below our means and picking up assets. And when the markets jumped, our net worth jumped with them. We define smart assets as those assets that are either purchased below market value or need modest improvements that add value. Debt is smart debt when your total cash flow is greater with the debt than it would be without it, and when you still have a cushion in case the asset goes down in value. You have this when your cash flow covers debt even in a market downturn. So, which one are you living? Let's be clear. Very few people live off the money produced by their assets. Recently, we looked at the income of the top 1% in the United States. The range varies depending on what part of the country you live in. We were shocked that you need to earn only $384,000 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and $608,000 in New York City to be in that elite of elite groups. But how many inside that already small group of folks have enough income producing assets to fund 100% of their expenses? We would be surprised if more than 1% were doing so. So, how do you move from a cash flow based life to an asset based life? The first step is to measure separately your income flow from work and your income flow from assets. Then create a dream budget. Finally, match your income sources to your current budget and your dream budget. And plan for a future where your income flow from your cash flowing assets begins to cover your budget. We have spent decades building assets, and we have finally reached a point where our passive income is several times greater than our living expenses. The first and most important step is to measure income and expenses and perform a gap analysis, taking income and separating it into two types. The first is money in exchange for work or your regular income. The second is money that comes from passive income. When we first did this analysis, there was a huge gap. It's useful to do this even if you have zero income producing assets. You can still measure the gap. To begin to address this, we started with a simple strategy. We always made sure that we earned a little bit more than we needed to live on, but we never outspent what we earned. Playing Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, we practiced this strategy, working toward mastering it. Another step we took included putting tax deferred money into our retirement accounts every year. It's a good plan, but it's just the beginning. Living within your means is a great start to building wealth. Next, we both chose to build assets and wealth. We began building wealth by investing money in something we knew fairly well, real estate, using money invested by friends and family. This is called syndication, and it's one of the fastest ways to build assets. First, always max your tax-deferred investments. It is a great path, but it's only the beginning to asset-based living. And this is something that is reiterated from the previous book that we looked about in terms of investing, talking about those tax-deferred investments and matching the maximum amount of funds you can, especially if your company is matching funds. Next, Implement one or more of the fastest ways to build income producing assets. Using other people's money, often referred to as OPM, take a job that pays in salary and equity and build a business that serves your investors. Real estate is an excellent investment vehicle and lends itself well to using other people's money. That's because everyone with some guidance can evaluate a real estate investment and make good choices. So, what did they do? There's a couple of programs out here now. One that just started in Tulsa, where a group of people come together and they get investors, and those people invest in the revitalization of Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's another program called Buy Back the Block, where people are pooling their monies together. In other words, they're investing the income they already have into real estate. All right. So that's really what this book is talking about. If you're interested in building wealth through real estate, some of these principles can apply to wealth building as a whole, but mainly they're focusing on real estate. All right. Build income producing equity to achieve asset based living. Some real estate deals are called development deals. They can look like this: here's empty land, let's buy it, let's develop it, and hope that tenants will come. Even in this, the far riskier type of real estate deal, you can pre-rent to tenants. In fact, most developers have their tenants ready to go before they begin spending money on a deal. Compared to a restaurant deal, it's almost like cheating. Can you imagine starting a restaurant and pre-selling 80% of your pizza at a set price, locked in for 10 years? So, how did we sell investors on our real estate concept? It wasn't very hard. We showed them actual property, the actual income and expenses, and the current return. Then, we presented a predictable strategy to increase income and reduce expenses over time, which in turn increases profit, return, and the value of the investment. Further, you can create leverage to increase your return on capital using investor capital as part or all of the down payment plus the bank's money. This is the path we have used for decades to create wealth. After a long while of building equity, we realized that we still were not generating enough income to fund our lives. We were moving toward our wealth goals, but not our passive income goals. We first saw this clearly when we began to break our personal financial statements and income statements into income from active and passive sources. By doing this, we could see what areas that we needed to increase. We could also see our net worth growing as our real estate assets grew larger every year, with appreciation coupled with paying down mortgages over time every single month. But the actual cash stream from passive income was not growing fast enough to keep up with our goal to have more passive income greater than both our active income and greater than our spending. At that point, perhaps 7 years ago, we decided to laser focus on building assets that would create cash flow. We worked harder in the areas where we earned money and equity, positioned ourselves better. Then we began buying real estate, cash flow focused real estate, with our own money. The combination of those forces brought us to the place where we can finally earn more money from our passive income producing assets than our income from our work. And that passive income alone now outpaces our living expenses. If we stop working today, our active income would go to zero, but our passive income would cover all our expenses without disrupting our lifestyle or investment strategies. This is where you want to be. So, assets versus cash flow based living. When we come back, we're going to be talking about assets that let you take advantage of downturns. And we're going to talk about horizontal and vertical income. What does that look like and what does that mean? Wealth can't wait. Well, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host today. I hope that you will have a great and wonderful weekend. You can join us back here on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where Pastor Robert will be bringing the message. Or you can wait until Monday and join us on Monday and Tuesday as we begin to close out season 3. Remember, Tuesday will be our last episode of next week, and we're going to be doing some giveaways on that Tuesday. So stay tuned for how you can participate in those giveaways. Again, remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so please go out and be light today. This weekend, I challenge you to think about, what are you already doing that you can turn into a business? And then do some research about the kinds of businesses that are available and see which business is right for you. All right? Thank you for your time and attention today. Take care and God bless. Have a blessed weekend.